This is the Late Life Archive. I am your host, Ty Besh. It's episode 10. We've been talking about this for a long time, and when I say a long time, I mean years. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. Sometimes things don't work out the way you want them to. Sometimes you are not a professional podcaster. You are doing other things in life. And that was me. And that is still me. But we made it to episode 10. I'm very happy to be here and to explain what has been happening for the last 10 episodes and what is going to happen for the infinite amount after this. Amount. After this. I'm laughing because I'm looking at the setup in front of me right now. I record these all in all different places, right? With the same microphone, so it sounds the same, but it is not the same where I record this. And right now, I have a moving blanket hanging next to me, like 6 feet tall, and I have a chair with a couple pillows on it, and then I have an ottoman up against the window because I'm facing a window, and then a pillow on top of that. I'm hoping that it's like suppressing some of the echo in this very large room, this tall ceiling room. I can hear the echo. I don't know if it's coming through on the microphone. I tend to take it out when I can, but it is quite silly. I'm just in this like little fort of things to suppress sound. I'm not going to tell you what is happening with episode 10 until the end. You're going to have to listen to what I have to say about Sue for episode 10. And then I will make the big announcement. Of course, you can fast forward and cheat if you would like, but there's a lot that Sue said that I do think you should listen to. You will learn a lot, and I think you'll take away something, at least something important from this, if not more than one thing. So without further ado, episode 10, let's talk about Sue. So Sue is a Dearborn gal, Dearborn, Michigan. And what I love about Dearborn is for as long as I think anyone can remember, maybe I guess I'll have to do some. I will put this in the notes at the end of this. I have never heard of Dearborn, Michigan not being the largest Middle Eastern population in the U.S. I've never heard a time when that wasn't true. So even when I was growing up, many, many moons ago, I'm not that old, but even for Sue, that was the case. At least West Dearborn was the population of, people immigrating or who had immigrated from the, let's just say, Middle East, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, et cetera, et cetera. So, I know there's something about saying the Middle East that people don't like, but we're Americans here, and we're uncultured. So we're going to say that, and we're just not going to, we don't mean harm by it. But she grew up in Dearborn, not on the west side, on the east side. And it was a whole different story, which I'm glad she was so open about this. Of course, just a sign of the times, the way it was back then. But she painted a picture of what Dearborn was like. Let's talk about it. So we're talking 60s. And, okay, no, I'm confused. She said West Dearborn is where she grew up. So maybe a different side, maybe East Dearborn was the other population of all these Middle Eastern people. So the first thing she said before we get into Dearborn was the fact that, just like Mark and just like all these people love to say, is her mother would tell her to get out of the house and go play for the whole day. Just leave. Just get out of my house. She grew up with many sisters and I believe a brother. But there was a lot of them in the house. And so, of course, the mother was like, get out. Go do what everyone else is doing. Go hang with your friends. Go do whatever you children do. Don't tell me. And the way she put it was, I could run amok. Which, oh man, I haven't heard that word in a long time. I love that. And speaking of, I love interviewing all of these Midwestern peoples because especially the Michigan people, they've got that Canadian, Southern Canadian, Northern, obviously American accent, which is very nasally, and you got the ahs and s, a lot of like like a lot of that sound. And when I'm gone from Michigan, I miss that a lot. And I'm glad to, doing the notes for this episode, I had to re-listen to, of course, this interview with Sue, which was years ago that I did the interview. And it was really nice to hear that, just strong Michigan accent. And so let's bring back Amuck is what I'm saying. Let's bring back Amuck. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to provide you the definition and the link to the dictionary in the notes because I know it's a word. I've heard it growing up, but it's got to be an official word, right? In the English dictionary. People wouldn't say it if it wasn't. Anyway, she said it was a great time to grow up in the 60s. And I think a lot of people have nice thoughts about growing up. The people that I'm interviewing this age, the over 50, under 80, that's kind of the sweet spot that I'm in right now. And they all have to, they're like, yeah, I loved growing up. It doesn't matter where they were or how much income their parents had or the situation. They were just like, I was outside playing and it was great. So fair enough. There's something to say about that. But let's move on to just these interesting details she talked about growing up in this moment in Dearborn. Mayor Hubbard. She brought up Mayor Hubbard. I will link to him. I don't know who he is. I'm assuming it's a he. She said he. Mayor Hubbard had this thing where there were no blacks allowed in their part of Dearborn. No blacks allowed. This is the time we're talking about, everyone. So, and it's a bummer. Her family and her weren't really appreciative and on that side. And she did mention, which was interesting, is the two people that her mother hired to come and clean the house up after these 6 kids, even though she did say that her mother kept it quite immaculate, even when it was on the off days of cleaning. Her mother would have to drive to, and what is the part of Inkster? Her mother would have to drive to Inkster, the part of Metro Detroit, the Detroit area, that Ford kind of deemed it okay for black people to live. Ford, it was able to encourage this area to be like, it's okay for them to be here. They're with us, kind of thing. That's such a fascinating, just that part of history is so crazy to think about. Even then, we're talking 60s. So, and of course, the reason they came here in the first place was to work for the plants, from the South. And so, yeah, wow. I can't believe that even in the 60s that was still a thing. I guess it does make sense, though, with segregation. So, Inkster. Her mother would go to Inkster to pick up these 2 people that they hired to clean the house once a week and would drive them to the house and then drive them back home, which is so crazy. Maddie and Maud, she remembered their names. That's really cool. And I feel like this is always the case with people that either are like cleaning your house or always around the house, like a babysitter or whatever it is. Like I hear this a lot, and these children always remember these people very vividly. Of course, and I remember my babysitter, or babysitters, but yeah, of course one was a cousin of mine. But the one that wasn't, I remember her. It's crazy. Like this woman that would be hanging out with us for many hours on weekend days so the parents could go out. I don't know who this person is. I never hung out. I never met them after that. Like, they watched me. I have a picture of them in my head. I have some very vivid memories. Okay, like I hope she's doing well. Like, and I think a lot of people have that. Anyway, so they did actually move out of Dearborn. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because moving to Canton, she went to a high school in Canton, Michigan, and Metro Detroit. And that was the first time that she ever interacted with a black person her age. That is so crazy. Obviously, because of Mayor Hubbard and the fact that she would, busy family, they wouldn't get out of Dearborn. She was walking to school, playing in the neighborhood, like never left Dearborn. This was the first time at Canton High School when she interacted with someone a different color than her. Anyway, fascinating. It's unreal. Moving on. When she was telling me these things, like these little stories from childhood, she did something that I love to hear. And I don't know if it's just like, if it's a childhood thing, like a youth thing, or if it's just a Michigan, I don't know. It's got to be a thing. I'll have to see if other people outside of Michigan. I didn't notice this when I interviewed other people in different states. I'll have to go back in the archives. But the way she would talk about people in her childhood was by first and last name basis. It would never just be like, oh, my friend Jill. It would not be like that. It would be like, oh yeah, so Jill Schlopkin. And like all of these full names. And I remember when I was a kid, I loved this because when I was a kid, yes, all the people that I remember growing up with from kindergarten all the way into high school until that's really interesting. Okay, so maybe it's a pre-high school thing. I know all of their first and last names to this day. But in high school, not so much. I don't know. You would call people by their last name a lot in high school. I do remember that. Ooh, this is interesting. There's got to be something to this. Anyways, I just love that she knew everyone's first and last name from her childhood. Her mom, and she brought this up in terms of, it's kind of a lesson, but it just came along the way, so I'll mention it, is because the house was so crazy and her mom had some health issues and Sue, had some health issues. She said she learned at a very young age from her mother that you have to be able to laugh at yourself, because when things are going bad and life is tough and things aren't going your way, you got to still be able to have that humor. And that's incredible. I totally agree. It's an interesting time in 2023 where we're seeing how comedians are complaining, they're getting canceled. People are having a hard time in terms of, how do I insert humor into my daily life or into my career without it going too far or without triggering someone or offending someone. It's a really interesting past few, like 5 or 6 years that we're in here. I don't know where it's going to go, but I grew up with that, and comedy and humor is huge for me. And so I definitely feel this. Let's move on. And speaking of the health problem, I don't want to go into her health problems, but she did mention something really cool, just in terms of the moment in time, was that when she was young, she had to have a surgery, and because of that, she had to get oxygen before the surgery, and it was an oxygen tent. An oxygen tent. Not like an oxygen mask. And I guess the technology wasn't there yet, or maybe it was the certain hospital. I'll put this in the notes because it is kind of a fascinating technological advance. Is she said she was in a tent. That's how they gave you like the oxygen to put you in. Anyways, that's crazy. I'm going to link to that because that's a really cool little tidbit. She had a lot of fond memories of summer. A lot, of course. And we kind of talked about this in the beginning, but she was a horseback rider, or she rode horses for most of her young life, and in multiple places. Here in Metro Detroit, yes, but Wyoming as well. And she talked about how she would be able to ride on 600 acres of land. It sounds like a lot. I don't know what that means. I'm trying to think about what 1 acre of land is. And I think, like, okay, let's talk about, speaking of Metro Detroit, you usually get like an acre or 2 of land, right, for your house. That's what your house is on. So I can kind of picture it. 600 seems excessive. It seems like you probably cannot see, if there were a fence, you could probably not see the fence on that's surrounding it. So maybe I'll just put it that way. I'm wondering how I can put something in the notes to help people like me that don't know how to visualize 600 acres. I'll figure that out. Maybe a creative way to do that. Anyway, riding horses, and she said she loved being responsible for such a magnificent animal. And she said magnificent animal. Having to clean them, care for them, all this kind of stuff. And she was saying, as a 5th grader, learning how to take care of an animal like this and to have that ownership of something, she said it made her feel great. And yeah, when you're young, you kind of hold on to that stuff where you're like, look at me. Like, I'm grown. I'm somewhat responsible for feeding and keeping this giant animal alive. And she rode horses for a long time. I don't really know the timeline, but she did say because of a few factors in a situation, she had to stop riding. They got rid of the horse, but she learned how to transition out of something like that, and how to move on to something new. Kind of a lesson as well. In terms of being so young and attached to these animals, and like you can imagine, as you're developing, you're growing with this beautiful animal you can ride, and just like the thing. I've ridden a horse, I think once, or actually I don't even know if I've ridden a horse. I think I refused because I was so scared. Yeah, but we all know the horse trope, right? What an animal. And she learned that, like, when you get attached to something like that, that you have to be able to, when it's time, to move on. And she did. We were talking about high school, and so in the interview, I said, was there anything out of the ordinary you remember about high school? And the only thing she said was, other than people streaking, and that threw me off. Like, it still does, just saying that. And I don't really know how to take that. She said, hey, it's the 70s. The song The Streak had come out. Everyone was obsessed. She had multiple stories of streakers to tell me about, running through the commons of this high school. Or, one time she was at a roller rink and, they would clean it in between, whatever. And someone would also would be rollerblading, streaking. Like, I don't, like, what? I did not deal with that growing up. Kind of jealous, actually. And I do remember in movies, like, that was a thing. And I guess, actually, what's funny is I think once in a while I would see, like, a sports game streaker. You'd always see those videos, but I never dealt with these people personally at school, or at our events, after school. So I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but it is. I think it would just be, going back to the humor in life, pretty funny just to see a naked person going through your eye line in different scenarios. So I'll try to include something in the notes here about streaking culture. I don't know why that was a thing, but it was.
Hello, everyone. This is your Action News reporter with all the news that is news across the nation on the scene at the supermarket. There seems to have been some disturbance here. Pardon me, sir. Did you see what happened?
Yeah, I did. I was standing over there by the tomatoes, and here he come, running through the pole beans, through the fruits and vegetables, naked as a jaybird. And I hollered over to Ethel. I said, "Don't look, Ethel!" And it's too late. She'd already been in the scenes.
Here comes
Boogie-da, boogie-da.
they go,
Boogie-da, boogie-da.
and he ain't wearing no clothes.
Oh, yes, they call him the streak.
Boogity, boogity.
Fastest thing on 2 feet.
Fast forwarding through high school, we kind of started talking about, what's next? What's after high school? And back then, I've gotten a few a few already in interviews, insights into obviously like it was never you go to college after high school. For a lot of people, that was not the case, including Sue. She was never even encouraged by her parents to go to college, whether it was for financial reasons or not. Who knows? She didn't know. But after high school, you needed a job. It's kind of just the way it was. And so, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people had a job and were going to college, but for her, it was, I need to get a job. And college wasn't really a part of that narrative in her life. And so she didn't go. And she ended up renting from an older woman, kind of this, I forgot how she explained the house situation, but it was separated, and so this older woman would be, in earshot of her in this, whatever this house was, duplex or whatever the situation was. But the funny thing was, she would mention this older woman, her landlord, would be in the bath regularly listening to Bobby Binton. I think she said Binton. I should have looked this up before the episode. It sounded like she said Binton. I don't know if that's his name. I'm going to include it in the notes because I will find this person and I will include a song. But yeah, just good old days. This old woman taking a bath, and through the wall you can hear this Bobby playing this song.
Where were you when I was just 17? Searching for you in each and every dream. I needed you, those wasted years between. Where were you all my life?
One of the things she would do, and she did mention that, she was a bookkeeper and she was skilled and held many jobs with, bookkeeping and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things she would do, and she mentioned a venue, and I want to include this because I love history of places. I'm assuming this place is long gone. She mentioned how she used to work at a place called Center Stage. This was a really big club back then. I think she said multiple floors. On Ford Road, I believe she said. I'll include it. And she would walk around with a basket of snacks. And she said, sometimes I would walk around with cigarettes. So she was like, and that seems a little older than 60s. So I think even for her at the time, it was kind of silly, because that is like a 1900s, 1910, 20s kind of thing, like the flappers, flapping around and, oh, yeah, you cigarettes, anyone? Like, you see what I'm saying? Even saying that, you're like, yeah, like the Atlantic accent. Like, it's way before the 60s. So it was funny for even her, but I think it was a way for her to, to get out and make a little more money on the weekends. So I'll include Center Stage in the notes so you can check out a brief history of club culture in the Detroit area. A large part of this conversation covered her husband. And I want to share the way they met because it's a cute, quirky little story that almost belongs in a movie. And that's why I want to include it. So I asked her how she met her husband. And she explained it was on a blind date. So she had this friend, good friend of hers, that was dating this guy, and they lived together, and Sue would always be around. And you can imagine, this guy was annoyed. Very annoyed with Sue always being around. He was like, you need to get a boyfriend. You need to find a partner immediately. And so her friend's boyfriend, I kid you not, this is what she said, her friend's boyfriend would carry a photo around of Sue in his pocket or wallet to be able to show men. And I guess he went to his high school reunion and, talking to this guy, and he was like, hey man, like, you're as cool as I remember in high school. Like, glad to catch up. I got this girl. Like, you should meet her, and I think you guys would get along. And so this gets back to Sue. And Sue explains it as, I didn't trust my friend's taste in men. We didn't have the same taste in men. So for Sue, it was like, I don't think this guy is worth my time. So she wasn't on board from the beginning. But ultimately, of course, she agreed. The way it went down is it was kind of a back and forth, like, back in the day, of course, it was you have to call people on a landline, and so it was just like a, who's going to call who, or how are we going to arrange this? So ultimately, Sue took matters into her own hands. She was like, give me his number, I'll call him. And so she calls his house. The father answers. He's sleeping because he works like pouring cement. And so she's talking to this dad, and she's like, yeah, well, like, let him know, like, we'll arrange something or whatever. And they meet, and she's like, hey, you know what? You're not Italian, are you? because of his last name, she was assuming. And I guess she had a bad experience with an Italian guy before this. And so he was like, well, I'm half. And she's like, all right, well, I could deal with that. And then she goes, you don't pour cement, do you? And he's like, I do pour cement. Yes, I do. So she's like, go this checklist of like, I don't want to deal with this like mafiosa Italian guy that I did before. So, things aren't going well for you because you're an Italian guy and you pour cement. I don't like it already. And so it was kind of the like, I'm not going to give this guy too much of a chance. But they ended up going to the Beach Boys concert at Pine Knob. And Pine Knob, to this day, is the place. I kid you not. Like, I was just there the other day. I love Pine Knob. It's incredible. It has and always will be the place for outdoor concerts in Michigan. Of course, it's closed in the winter because Pine Knob is a skiing resort, a very small skiing resort in the winter. But in the spring and summer and fall, you can catch the biggest names at Pine Knob. So it's just cool. Yeah, even back then, like, Pine Knob was the place. And that was a drive, though. From Detroit, that's like a 50 minute drive. That was like, when you're young, too, it probably feels like, oh, yeah, here we go, like going on this big trip. So they go to the Beach Boys concert. He bought the tickets. He's going to pick her up. In her head, she's like, I'm not giving this guy the chance, like the time of day. Like, I'll be there, whatever. We'll see where it goes. But I'm not going to, pull out all the stops. She decides to wear overalls, military boots, overalls with patches. Like, just grungy. She doesn't care. And normally, of course, she explained, when she was going on regular dates, she would, do her hair, wear a dress, put a bunch of makeup on. And she was like, no, not doing it. We're going to Beach Boys. I want to see Beach Boys. This guy is just my way to get to the Beach Boys concert. And so I guess he pulls up in this super cool car, of course, back in the 60s. He gets to the door. She opens it. And he's wearing, she explained it like this, a tight red fishnet shirt and designer jeans. And the second she saw it, she regretted what she was wearing. But she did not change. And so they're on their way to Pine Knob, long drive, as I explained. And by the time they get to the parking lot, he says, do you just want me to sell these tickets and drive you back home? Because that's how bad the talk was in the car. And not because they weren't getting along, but because she was on purpose making it hard for him. And of course, we all know girls like this. And sometimes it's the test. Sometimes girls are just angry and they're like, I'm not going to, this guy isn't worth my time, but I'm still here, but whatever. And so they did stay, but it's hilarious that like, wow, she must have been very annoying in this moment for him. But I already told you they were married, so we know where this is going. They go to see the show, and the idea, I guess she said, is the way she was acting, the reason for it was guys like this were always full of themselves. He was attractive, he was cool, he had a nice car, he had a job, he had things going for him. And so she knew this guy, you know? We're human beings. We all assume things. We put people in categories to make our lives easier. She didn't want to deal with this because, like, just another guy like this. But he wasn't, obviously. He drops her off at the end of the night. She didn't have anything to say about how the concert went or the drive back. He dropped me off. And what he said to her was, "Do you want to go on another date? Because you've got guts." And so for him, it was the same thing as her. Is he was like, hey, this girl is different. She's not like all these other girls I'm meeting in high school and, you know, college or whatever. And so for both of them, they were like, oh, okay, a little surprise here. I like this. On the second date, and this happened much further down in the conversation, on the second date, he told her, we're going to get married. He knew it from day one. And she didn't, but he did. Fast forward a little bit. There was a weird situation where she ended up in a house alone that they bought together before he moved in. So she's in this house and she falls down the stairs. It's not like she's old or anything, but she falls down the stairs. And so she went to her chiropractor. And this was a cool little piece that we talked about here. Because the way she said it, and I'm going to quote, is, our family believed in chiropractors, so that's why I went. Because back then, and even when I was growing up, this has been a thing for a long time, chiropractic work and chiropractors have always been very taboo, right? And so for her to say, my family believed in chiropractors, is the correct statement, because that's how it had to be back then. So she went to the chiropractor, and in this moment in time, they were about to get married. It's like in that little window there. So her husband, let's just say, was wondering, because when he was growing up, I guess in college, he went for a certain thing. He was looking to do medical. And he applied for chiropractic school and got accepted to a school in the area, but didn't go for obvious reasons, because he's like, I don't want to, this is like a terrible idea. I won't make money. No one will accept me, blah, 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 blah. And so in this moment, he's like, hey, I was accepted to a chiropractic school. I like what I'm seeing here. This is really cool. I think I might want to switch careers. So he quit his job and went to chiropractic school, got a certification. And very quickly, he became very involved in the community. And I guess after many, many years, he was like, he was a guy. Like, he would go around and give talks and be a part of research and all that kind of stuff. Very cool. That, kind of late in life, like we're talking like late 20s here, made a career change and went for it. That is super cool. She did mention one thing, which I had to, I have to bring up because I have a connection to it. One of the moves they made to open a chiropractic office for him was Ludington, Michigan. Ludington, Michigan. I spent 4 months there before filming a feature film for someone in Michigan, and I loved it. And she said the chiropractic office was in a small house across from House of Flavors. I remember House of Flavors. I'm going to include this in the notes. Ludington is such a cute little town, and it's dead for most of the year. You're seeing people like July 4th to September, and then it is a ghost town. There is like a coffee shop and a couple restaurants open, and you're still driving out of Ludington to get to main stuff. But we're talking back then. So the way she explained it was there was nothing. When they opened the chiropractic office, they were still majority serving the Amish community, people that would show up on buggies. Like, that's so cool. And she could not deal with the winter, obviously. The summer's magnificent. The beach and just the water and the culture, I'm sure it was as great as it was back then as it is now. But you hit winter. Oof. Michigan winters are tough regardless. but you're right there off the water, and it is not fun. And so she said they had a winter, and she was trying to learn all these hobbies and blah, blah, blah. But she, not the nail in the coffin, but she did say she could not deal with the fact that the closest mall was 2 hours away in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so, you have this Metro Detroit kid that's surrounded by all these malls, and you have to drive 2 hours just to get to a semblance of a mall. That's crazy. They got out of there pretty quick, but I just loved that. Another connection to Ludington. We love Ludington. Life went on, and, went to Florida, went to different parts of the U.S. for work and to live, and came back to Michigan. We're going to fast forward to still talk about her and her husband. So her husband did pass not too long ago, and it was sudden and it was unexpected. And she was explaining how nothing was in place for his death. So the first year after his death, she couldn't even grieve. And it was kind of a warning she gave, is she was like, you have to do this stuff regardless of your health. Get the will in order, get the property in order, get all the stuff in order, because she had to deal with all of this while also trying to grieve the death of her husband. And that's really sad to hear. And a good takeaway as well is people tell you, people remind you, but no one does it, right? It doesn't seem like anyone does it. And if you haven't done it, do it now. I've done it, and I'm not even 40 yet. You never know what's going to happen and when. And this is leading into a bigger conversation here. But before we do that, just get it in order, or at least do a written will, or, line things up for your family, your children, passwords and accounts, and put people on as whatever they're called. I forgot what banks call them. Power of attorney, kind of line that up. Just do it. Just do it. You don't want to be dealing with that, especially in a moment like this when someone passes, and you have to immediately figure that out. On to the life lessons. Speaking of, she really only had one thing to say, and it's kind of the broader thing we're talking about here. Don't wait to have fun. Do it when you're young. Don't worry about making a living if you're not really living anyway. That's huge. Kind of the same thing as Mark, right? Is stop focusing so much on career and assuming you're going to live till you're 90 and you're lining all this stuff up for the long game. It's good to have a balance of that for sure. But of course, so many people just school, work, career goals, loans, money, and then you never know when something like this is going to happen, like it did to Sue. And so she has a much bigger appreciation for that, of course. She lost a partner way too soon. And so now she's on her own, figuring out what's next. It's a good reminder to, especially now, in this day and age, things are tough. It's hard to find work. It's hard to find steady work. It's just getting messier and messier as the years go on. Yes, true. But at the same time, you should not have to adjust in a negative way to that. As it gets worse, your life should not continue to get worse in terms of the way you treat yourself, your time, etc., your family, all that kind of stuff. She never went on vacation. I think she went on one mini vacation, she said, very small. But since she had, from the time she had married her husband until when he passed, they went on one very small trip together. Never went on vacation for real. And the saddest part, and I need to say this for dramatic effect, they had a vacation planned and he passed right before they were going to leave. And that is such a bummer. So for her, life lessons aren't just something like like it is with other people that are still learning, and everything is fine, everything's going well, and they learn from mistakes. For her, it was something that happened to her that was as big as her partner passing, and that is a pretty easy lesson to learn in life, is to go, wow, I wish we would have done things a little different, because now he's not here. That is Sue. I just feel lucky and blessed to have had this conversation with her, especially because it was pretty deep at the end there. I cannot thank her enough for sharing this stuff, and for me to be able to share these things with you, a great reminder to enjoy your life regardless of how well you think it's going for you. Enjoy the time with your family and your friends. You never know. You never know. That was Sue. This is episode 10. It is time to reveal the announcement. I know Sue. Sue is a close person to me, and I've known every single person that I've interviewed for the last 10 episodes. So I wanted to interview people that I know and love first. And I knew that it was a good way to start this project with people that I knew and trusted, and they trusted me and would be open to this. And so that's who I did first. And I'm glad I did that first, because it was a way for me to preserve things for my circle while I was kind of testing the concept. Let's call it phase 1. And I love where it has gone. These interviews are now archived. We have the podcast, which is turning out to be very fruitful already. And it's only growing. And so phase 2, of course, from episode 11 and on, it's going to be complete strangers to me and people that I'm connected to and from, whether it's just a push of marketing or, a conversation that I have with someone. That is where this is going to go. And so I encourage you. I will put the website in the link. Please visit. Please reach out to me. There's a contact page on there. If you have someone that you want me to do this with, I can do it over the phone. I prefer to do it in person, especially nowadays where AI is running rampant and everyone's doing things on Zoom and you don't know who's real anymore or not already in 2023. It is really important to me to give these people the time of day because they deserve it. This is the Late Life Archive. I will be back for phase 2, hopefully sooner than later. Talk to you then.
Echo!